Hey folks, welcome back to Wisconsin Family. We're just a couple blocks from bustling downtown Madison over on East Washington Avenue. We're at Steve's Auto Sales. We're going to check in with Steve later on in the program, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about what he's got on his lot that might be a right fit for you. But first, if you think that you or someone you know might be suffering from social anxiety disorder, you might want to stick around for this segment because we are joined now by author Marcus Bales, who's written the book Speak-Confident. Welcome, Marcus.
Hi, thanks for having me on this morning, guys.
I just have to ask, is that how you introduce the book, or do you just say Speak Confident?
Speak-Confident.
Okay.
I think Speak Confident was just a little bit too generic,
Sure.
and I wanted to put the dash in there to signify that speaking and confidence should always be thought of together.
Interesting, very interesting. So give us a rundown. What is this book about?
Yeah, so the book is my personal collection of stories and advice on overcoming social anxiety. When I was a kid, I suffered from really severe social anxiety to the point where it was affecting my schooling, my social life, and I realized at a very young age that I needed to overcome that if I wanted to get to the lofty goals and dreams that I had. So I started breaking down the way we communicate and how I started to communicate so effectively. And by the time that I was in my 20s, I was a professional speaker. So a lot of my friends and family were like, how did you go from socially anxious kid to speaking in front of thousands of people on any given weekend? And that was kind of the moment that made me realize maybe other people would want to know these tips, techniques, and I rolled in a lot of the stories behind those tips and techniques to show, okay, you know, it took me some trial and error. It wasn't the smoothest road, but if I can do it, you can do it too.
Right.
Yeah, well, obviously there's probably a lot of people that can relate to some level of social anxiety. I think it's speaking in front of a crowd is the number one fear amongst Americans, which
more
is
so than
interesting.
death, from what I've heard.
Correct. Yeah. So you know, lots of us can relate on some level, and obviously you as well, having experienced it yourself. But what made you really stop and say, "I need to write this book"?
So it was actually a friend of mine who was asking for some advice on giving a presentation at work. And that was kind of the clicking point of I was giving very specific tips, very specific advice, and kind of rolling in some stories into how to give this presentation. And we were kind of joking around like, well, you should write a book about this then. And I was like, oh, maybe I should. So I started writing down tips, writing down different stories and events that happened. And soon enough, a couple pages turned into a couple hundred, and it was a fully formed book. And then the feedback was so great from the small audience that I demoed it to. I was like, well, let's roll it out to the masses.
Wow, that's an incredible story.
Just sort of started unrolling from there.
It just kind of happened almost.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the case with a lot of great ideas is you have that kind of inception moment and you just start rolling with it and it starts to gain its own momentum.
So now a lot of people who suffer from social anxiety disorder, you know, they might feel like they're wired that way and it's going to be really hard to change. Is that something, is social anxiety, now that you've kind of overcome it, is it still something you struggle with?
It is. Social anxiety, like a lot of other mental disorders, it's not a one kind of a fix situation. It's something that you deal with for your entire life. You just learn how to manage the symptoms and kind of overcome them. But it's always something that's in the back of your head that you're conscious of.
So for somebody who's watching at home who might be relating to this and thinking, I don't know if I can possibly overcome social anxiety, let's talk about just sort of baby steps. What is step one?
Step one, that's the easiest one. It's acknowledging that you have social anxiety. So many people say, I'm an introvert, I just don't like talking in front of people, but they don't acknowledge the underlying root of that, which is, I have social anxiety. I have a fear of speaking in front of people, whether it's one person or 100 people. So acknowledging that you have that, like any other problem, it's going to allow you to start to take the steps to improve it.
So now if somebody is interested, if one of our viewers might be interested in buying your book, where can they get it?
Yeah, so the book is available on Amazon, both in the hard copy and the Kindle version. Okay. And it's also available in the audio version on iTunes and Audible.
Wow, great information. I think anyone could stand to learn something, whether you are socially anxious or not, because there are so many levels of this, whether it's like you said, even just talking to one person or feeling confident in your information. So that's great.
Yeah, and you're very polished now, and you're doing a really good job with this interview. You're very well spoken, and some people might look at that and say, well, I could never be that. But to hear you say that this is something that you still struggle with, and the symptoms are still there, and it's more about managing the symptoms, I think brings some hope to people too, that, hey, like you said, if he can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, that's what I really wanted this book to be. Even if you take one thing away from it, what I'd like that to be is anyone can do it. I share a lot of stories from the beginning of my life, and they're pretty drastic in the level of social anxiety that I had. And I think a lot of people will be able to relate to them and then see the stories at the end of the book and say, wow, if he can go from this level of social anxiety to this, I can learn to speak in front of a couple people.
Incredible.
What a great story.
Yeah. Thanks
Marcus
for writing
Bales
this. It's
is
great.
the author of Speak-Confident. You can find it on Amazon, both in digital and hard copy format. Marcus, thank you for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
And don't go away. There's more Wisconsin Family coming up after the break.